the core of it to me is the red flag for me is you don't care about
the foundation.
me. Yeah, you don't care about me. That was kind of like, that was just like the match being lit, is like seeing the attention paid to somebody else is enough to like, it would trigger you.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that I do want to talk about on this podcast is my most recent boyfriend.
Mm-hmm. Hit it. So, all right, that's a happy face.
Plenty.
Is he the one was he in the one of your TikTok videos on the couch? Was he the one laid out on the couch in the TikTok videos?
Okay, so wait. Okay, hold on, hang on. So there's two things I want to talk about. So there's that guy, he's the best, but there's a guy before him. So I was dating somebody throughout the season of Canada's Drag Race, and I promised myself that I would not date anybody throughout the season because it's all about me, and I want this to be all about me. And then you meet this guy, and then he's the best, and you never thought you're going to meet somebody. And he was at the finale of Canada's Drag Race at the Phoenix Concert Theatre in Toronto, and he was so drunk, and he was like flaunting himself all over the place, and he wasn't paying attention to the finale. He was such an embarrassment. And then right after the finale, like a month-ish later, he dumped me right after my uncle died. And I did have this moment where I sat there with myself and was like, why do I attract this type of person? So the question is, so now I'm with a great guy and everything's great. But before this, my question to you, both of you, is like, how do you break that pattern and how do you like let yourself go? Because now with this new guy, like he's talking about shit in the future, and like that scares the shit out of me because future doesn't exist in my past relationships. It's not a thing.
Yeah.
So how do you let go?
Okay, I'll
go, Matthew.
I'll say that in kind of like my experience and all the kind of professional work that I've done, I could probably say that the two greatest things that stand out as kind of variables in this is, one, the earliest relationships that we have. So checking in with yourself, like really kind of doing that deep dive. It's so cliche therapy shit. But really doing a deep dive and checking in on what are those earliest relationships with parents or family members, and what kind of patterns have I noticed in the kind of guys that I'm into or relationships that I've had that also maybe mirror some of the earliest relationships, and what kind of childhood trauma am I trying to address but using all the same bullshit tools that I've ever used that have never gotten me anywhere. Right. So that's one, checking in on that part. And the second part is also checking in on the cultural stuff that we've been talking about. So obviously, growing up as a marginalized person, oppressed because of race, ethnicity, things like that. Also growing up as a gay person. What are the marginalized experiences that we've had that shape a very negative and irrational belief about ourselves, and how much does that play out in the kinds of relationships where we're chasing after approval and acceptance from people that we value and think, that we need that attention from. So checking in on those two things first, noticing your own patterns, and then being able to start working through that consciously.
And that takes vigilance, and sometimes, it's my turn.
Hear me out.
Sometimes it's what? Okay. What?
I just want Alec, shut up. What I want to know is this.
You shut up.
What? So we're talking about you shut up and spank me.
You
baby.
Shut up.
So we're talking about
You guys have a toxic relationship.
Spit on me. I want to know, like, what is the account? So when we're saying the word toxic, like, we often villainize the person that we were dating. Like, all my exes are the worst people in the world. So what is the accountability that we have to put on these people, or does it matter?
Yes.
Well, that's a good question.
First of all, when we're talking about a toxic relationship, we're talking about the relationship, the dynamic. We're not assassinating another person's character, whether it be somebody else's or our own. Like you said earlier, this is not who I am, but sometimes I just get my shit stirred up. Yeah, because that's not who you are, that's what you do, right? And so it's about the kind of conflict of what each person is doing when they're in a very vulnerable and intimate kind of relationship. So making sure that you're kind of checking on that stuff first, how you frame it.
I think the accountability piece for somebody who's been in a marriage for 19 years, where we are with our stuff is like we have to own it. But we've made the investment and the commitment to be together, so that's maintenance. However, until you're in a relationship that's long-term, the accountability piece for me was really about myself, and that took vigilance. Like just watching my words, watching my expectations. When I was starting to get better, it was very telling. I had a boyfriend, and I said to him, you shouldn't be so nice to me. I'm not used to it. Like I said that, and he said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I'm your boyfriend. I want to be nice to you. And Alec, if you're in a relationship with somebody and you love each other, they should be nice to you. You should be. And so what I was learning for my part, in my words and in my actions, what I had to learn was what I was taught that love felt like, this is what love feels like to me, was really destructive and toxic. And I had to relearn what kindness to myself felt like, and accepting kindness, and accepting graciousness, and accepting affection for another person, because I learned that I didn't know how to do that. I could be physical with somebody. I had no problem doing that. But it was very hard for me to be, like you said, vulnerable. When somebody said the person who shows up for you is the dangerous relationship, because that calls on you to kind of show up and be vulnerable as well.
Yeah, that's what you've said, Alex.
So shut up.
Many times before about about the relationship.
Shut up. That part.
You've attributed so much shit to the relationship that you had with your dad, right? Where you always felt like he wasn't validating, he wasn't attentive. Whenever he actually was even participating at all, it was just to criticize. So you were mostly just kind of chasing after his affection for so long. And so it's not just perhaps maybe such a surprise that for, in your adult life then, you keep chasing after people, and you are only interested and attracted to the people who aren't going to be there or who will just criticize you and not be nice to you, because of the fact that that is just a familiar dynamic. And as human beings, we don't like change. We follow and grasp after what feels familiar because it's comfortable.
Right. When my therapist told me it was an addiction, I was like, what are you talking about? He said, you're used to the chase. You're used to that's your high. That is where your adrenaline, that's erotic to you, is the chase. That's what's sexy. And then all of a sudden I was realizing, when I looked at it objectively, having to chase after somebody to make them like you is gross. It's just kind of like, ew, like I don't want to be that person anymore. And I was that person for so long. Right. But, but like the chase is what felt familiar. The chase is that was my default position.
Wait, I just want to jump in real quick. I just want to say a couple of things for people who might not totally identify with all of this, because for a lot of people it very much is kind of an addiction and something that needs to be treated in that specific way. There's a lot of people also that it might not necessarily need to be even defined as an addiction if we're just really hyper focused on the patterns of dysfunction that continue to exist. So noticing that, and also being careful to be kind to ourselves, Alec, maybe not to call it gross and beat ourselves up and shame ourselves for it, but to be able to call it out as something that is kind of off the path of love, and being able to then gently, kind of redirect and experiment with some new, maybe more uncomfortable ways of approaching relationships.
For the record, just the only thing I have to add to that is I had to identify my problems as an addiction, because I couldn't stop seeing I was in a toxic relationship that I refused to leave. That I knew cognitively and objectively it was a bad relationship, and I stayed in it anyway. And that when I knew that's when I had to identify it as an addiction in order to get better, in order to move on.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not what's my name, don't worry. Is there any kind of toxic behavior this is going to sound so messed up, but is there any kind of toxic behavior that is healthy behavior as well? Like, say I wanted to post a photo to get some guy's attention, or say I wanted to
thirst trap
about an ex. Yeah, say I wanted to post a thirst trap, or say I wanted to subtweet about an ex that made for good content online. Like, are those things okay? Because I've had an ex come up to me and be like, were you subtweeting about me? And I was like, yeah.
Alec, what are your thoughts? I'm curious.
I want to hear your thoughts first.
Okay. Well, I would probably liken it to, if you really kind of like break it down in basic terms, we're always going to do some shit that's not just about kind of pure love and health. Look, we're not going to be Mother Teresa ever. We're always going to do some shit that's just very human and ego-driven. it's more about how can we have the majority of our decision making and motivation in life come from a place of strength building and growth and healthy living, and then also like, you know, kind of less of the stuff. It's kind of like, all right, you want to make sure that you're eating healthy, you know, maybe 5 days out of the week, and then you eat some shit a couple days of the week, right?
Right.
It's just finding the right balance on it and being.
You think it's kind of
conscious.
like,
if you're gonna do it, at least be conscious of it.
Just own it. You're saying own it.
Yeah, I think it sounds like it, because like I love talking about my exes online, because like, and I'm not like bashing their names, like I'm not saying like, and one time this, you know, I guess I kind of bashed them on this podcast, but you know, it does create like as an artist and as, you know, a drag queen that's been on this reality TV show where fans know me out of drag. I'm not like a Beyonce where they know nothing about my personal life. Like, they know everything about me. They know about my coming out story. They've watched me on these 10 episodes on Canada's Drag Race, plus they all follow me now. So there is that, like, my fandom needs that relatability to kind of stay in tune with me. So it's like sometimes, although it might be a little toxic-y, it does give my fans that like that look into my life, which I don't mind giving them, because we all go through shit. We're all mad at our exes sometimes. We're all, you know, betrayed sometimes. So I tend to play into that, you know, kind of very, very like Taylor Swift of drag vibes.
Where do you draw the line? When is stuff, what's personal? Like, if you're like, yeah, I'm not going to post about that. Do you have anything? Do you have a line in your head?
A boundary?
I think now that I'm in something healthier, like, I just don't even really talk about it, because it's
okay.
healthy.
It sounds like you're a little more protective of that.
Yeah, it seems like now it's like, because also when I was dating this guy during the season of Canada's Drag Race, I go, you know when you can watch yourself have conversations with people, and you watch yourself like, you're watching yourself lie to yourself, and it's embarrassing, because there's so many conversations that I had with people that were like, yeah, but he's a great guy. Like, I love him. Like, we're going to last so long. I have a feeling like he's my next boyfriend for sure. And all my friends are like, yeah, hun, cool. Like, good luck. And they, you know, your friends see it. Your friends see it before you see it. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's like you talk yourself into these toxic relationships because you want your friends to justify and tell you that you're doing the right thing, because that reassurance means like, okay, I'm not crazy. This is normal. Yeah.
No, I was surrounded by friends who kept it real to the point where I couldn't talk to them. They would be like, don't talk to me about him. We have the same conversation over and over again. So now as you're making the transition into a healthy relationship, what do you feel like is the biggest difference in you?
That's a great question, Alec. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I would say
she's my granddaughter. Priyanka's my granddaughter on the show. That's how we
obsessed with you.
Yeah, that's how we refer to each other. What's the biggest difference in you?
It has to be the self-worth, and it has to be like doing things for me and knowing when someone looks at you for your fame versus looks at you because they could see your soul and connect with it. Like, there's been so many guys that, like, you know, see the sparkly smoke and mirrors Priyanka, and I've let them in, and it's only burned me. And with you know, the latest healthy relationship that I'm in, it's I could tell he liked me from a year ago. He messaged me this guy because I was trying to get a tattoo cover up, and he's a tattoo artist. And it was never about, oh, like, tell me secrets about Drag Race, or it was never about, so how'd you start drag? It was just all about, like, me as Mark, as a human being. And I think that it's knowing, and you have to be willing to accept a more vulnerable side of people is what is the hardest thing I've had to do this last couple of months, is opening myself up to somebody. But it's been the healthiest thing, because I'm accepting love in the way that I deserve it.
I love that, because what that does is it becomes a deal breaker. I mean, whether or not you keep going on with this guy, if you find yourself in another relationship and it doesn't feel right and it doesn't line up with who you 100%. Are and what you feel you deserve, it becomes harder and harder to stay in those situations. Because I found myself ping-ponging back to the old stuff and going, ugh, this is so gross. I can't do this anymore. I'm worth more than this.
Yeah, yeah, it's self-worth, and it's so hard to find your self-worth. Like I've been very lucky to be on this show and be called the trade of the season and have all these opportunities where, you know, people are now desiring me, and I'm great in drag and great out of drag. So I just think for those who are listening, who are on the search for their self-worth, it's like, be as selfish as you can be, because only you can fulfill yourself. Nobody else can do it.
Yeah.
Wow. We usually ask people to end on a hot message, but I think you just did.
Yeah, that's.
You're welcome.